Hey everyone, Steamboy here, and welcome to part 6 of the making of the Elon Musk animated pixel portrait. And I just gotta say, if you guys have stuck around this long and watched through all 6, thank you so much. I didn't expect it to go for this many parts, but I did have a lot of footage while I made this thing, so I wanted to get through every single step and go through my whole process. So thank you. In this one, I'm just going to go through the final couple sequences with Elon smoking the rocket and then doing the classic facial expression that he made on the Joe Rogan podcast. And then, looping back to the original pose. So here I'm just touching up some of the frames for the actual smoking face. And for this, I referenced the original footage from the podcast. And the biggest thing I needed to decide here was whether or not I'd have his hand in the frame. Like, at first I was thinking, maybe the hand grabs the rocket and, in his mouth, and that's how it transitions. But because I wanted to stick with the style that I've kind of established for these, where it's just a floating head and there's no neck, it would be kind of weird if it was just a floating head and a floating hand. Not to mention, at this point, I'm like so far into it, and I'm like, let's just get to the finish line. So I thought it'd be easier if I just had him kind of suck the rocket in, which, I think it ended up working pretty well. So once I have most of these frames, I go grab the rocket, and I try to do a couple frames of the rocket changing trajectory, getting sucked in. And then the actual animation of it, I do it in After Effects, but here are the frames on the rocket sprite. And then once I feel good about those, I make a new file so that I can kind of see them all and save them all into one sprite. So just save that off into After Effects. And then going in, importing the footage, and then setting the keyframes for how each of the frames will show up as the rocket gets closer. Oh, you know what? Did I end up just rotating the rocket here? I think I might have just rotated it in After Effects and used like the last frame from the one that I made in Photoshop. Yeah, so I rotated 45 here, but then I ended up grabbing the sprite that I made for that. Yeah. And then skipping ahead a little, I made a couple frames for the rocket to light up, the end of the rocket, as he's inhaling. So just set those up. And once I felt good about that, the last part of the sequence was just to fade the background back into red, because I have to get ready to transition back and loop back into his starting pose. So I just decided to just do like a slow transition on his inhale. And here it is. So the final sequence is him making that classic expression, and I know that I need it to transition back into the main pose. So I want to derive the main shape of this pose from the main pose, just so when it transitions back, it doesn't like pop or jump or anything like that. And obviously using the reference here, trying to get as close as possible while staying with the style that my original pose is in. I thought this pose would be really easy to do because his face is so distorted, but it was actually kind of hard to make it to get the eyebrows right and the mouth curled, like the frown just right. And you can see that I skipped the rough line art phase entirely here because the pose is very close, or the angle of the head is very close to the original pose, and I wanted the poses to transition from each other. It was better to just use the first pose as a base, because if I roughed it out, it would probably look very different. So here I pretty much have the line art. I'm happy with the line art. I just used the same hair. And then I think I end up tweaking it a little bit, but then going right into color, sectioning off the shadow areas, coloring in some of the line art. And I'm just gonna let this run here so you guys can see the whole process. And that's pretty much the final here. I'm just gonna double check it. Looks like it transitions well, but I still need a frame in between these two poses. So here's something I did that was different. I selected all of the dark colors, like the line art basically, and I made 2 new layers, and then I set them on different colors on low opacity so I could do the in-between. This was super janky. I'm definitely sure there's got to be some better way of doing this in another program, and maybe even Photoshop has some onion skinning options that I'm not aware of, but this is how I did it because I just had this one frame to do, and this is the frame that I'm least proud of in this whole thing because it looks nothing like Elon. I'm sure you guys have seen clips of anime or even games where like you pause at the right second and the in-betweens just look nothing like the characters. They're totally off model. That was this frame for me. But I knew because it goes through so quickly, it goes past so quickly, no one's really gonna be able to judge the likeness from this one frame. So I just kind of go ahead and color it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Who does he look like? Some kind of gnarled up Charlie Sheen or something. So I'm just gonna skip ahead a little bit here, and I guess I did decide to redo the hair. But the ear, you can see that I just copied it from the other frame. The ear is so complex that it takes a long time to just make that one version of it. So I ended up just taking the previous frame, warping it, and then touching it up. And then now I'm just doing the final couple of in-betweens, which are just warps of the main keyframes. Bringing his chin in check here. And then cleaning up those newly warped in-betweens. So once I had those done, I wanted to do the final expression and maybe have them just like give you a little people's eyebrow, a little animation on the mouth at the very end, which if you look at his actual expression, he doesn't really do that. He just kind of goes right into that face. And like the eyebrows and mouth, they all move together. So here I'm just kind of making the final touches, making sure the eyebrow doesn't twitch too much. And I think that's the animation that I go with, just touching it up a little bit here. Last thing, and then the last thing to do is just to get one more in between to get back into the main pose. It's just an easy rotation of the main frame. It's very close already. Just touching it up, making him blink just to help in that transition. And here's how that feels. And then I just need one more frame where his eyes are like half open. So it's like closed eyes, half open, fully open. So this half open, like sleepy version of Elon will be the last frame of the animation. And then it goes back to the first frame. And I almost forgot, there's one more piece of animation that I did here. I originally intended that exhaust smoke when his face opens up to be like his exhale, I guess, or like, you know, the smoke coming out after he draws from the rocket. But then, you know, I mean, I don't smoke, but just watching the video, you can see that right after he smokes it, there's, you know, a bunch of smoke around him, and there's some smoke that comes out of his mouth. So I just wanted to make sure there was like a little puff right after the rocket drops, just for effect. And the process here is the same that I did for those exhaust smokes, those smoke jets, except it's a cloud here that I try to break into, you know, 4 or 5 pieces as it moves away from his face. So as you can see here, I'm just trying to get those shapes as organic as possible, breaking down from the bottom left to the top right, and then almost every single new frame I make, I shift it like up and over 1 pixel. Yeah, just duplicating the previous frame, erasing and drawing to make it, you know, dissolve properly. And there it is. And once again, once I have all the solid silhouette frames, I go in and do some shading. Again, just like treating each of the chunks as a sphere and shading them that way, drawing in the shadows. And it's just going frame by frame and making sure everything lines up smoothly, making the pieces more detailed, or like basically following like the rules of entropy. It just gets more detailed or more complex, more chaotic as time goes by. So we're just going to skip ahead here, have the sequence thrown into After Effects, make sure it's timed in the right spot, and give it a quick run. Feeling good. So now I just got to decide on the ending frame. So I want to end it right as he's opening his eyes there, so we can go back to the original frame. And that's basically it. So the last thing I'm going to do is, like I mentioned at the start, you know, these are done in 128 by 128, but my final renders are in 512. So I make a new composition that's 512 by 512. I put in the 128 composition, and then I scale it up, making sure that I have the non-anti-alias checkbox checked. And then I'm ready to export to render. So here's the final animation, as you guys have probably seen many times by now, if you guys have been following along. And again, I just wanted to say thanks everybody for sticking around and checking this out. I certainly had tons of fun and learned a lot while I made this. So I was just hoping to share some of that with you guys. I know a lot of people in my previous, in the comments for my previous pieces have been asking like, hey, what software do you use and what's your process like? So hopefully this sheds some light into how I make these things. And I'll definitely record, you know, any future ones I do as well. I'd love to hear in the comments if you guys have any feedback on the format here. If, you know, 6 parts is too many. I certainly didn't expect it to be 6 parts at the beginning, but you know, if you guys would have preferred something more condensed into like a 1 part, or, you know, if you guys felt like I didn't go in depth enough, or if I dragged on, I'd love to hear any of that stuff. Just so, you know, if I make another one of these, I could, you know, improve it and fine tune it to everybody's needs. So that's it. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SteamBoy33. And if you like what you saw here, definitely would appreciate, you know, subscribe and likes and all that. So for now, SteamBoy signing off.